and welcome to my channel. My name is Nicole Watson and I am so excited to be part of this Mixed Media Mania Hop, where I'll guide you through creating a mixed media canvas that I've called Inspired Peony. So grab your supplies and create along with me. Or if you don't have the stencil, wait till the end and learn how you can win your own copy. I'm using an 8x10 primed canvas. However, even though it was already primed, I'm adding 2 layers of my own gesso to prep the surface. You could also use an art journal if you prefer. Now it's all about building layers on this canvas for the mixed media look. First, I add book pages along with some pages that were pre-printed with the same Peony stencil that I'm going to use in a little bit. I will link that tutorial below and up in the iCard so that you can see it if you'd like. Add a good layer of matte medium on the back and the front of the pages so that they are secured to the surface of the canvas. Don't forget to wrap some of the pages around your sides to finish the look. For the next layer, I'm just going to stamp some of these numbers with archival ink on the surface of the canvas, and because the canvas gives a little bit in the center, I do put my hand behind to ensure a good stamp, but I'm not going for perfection here. And then make sure, just like you put the paper on the sides of the canvas, to also stamp on the sides of the canvas. Next, I want to push back some of that color and strong text that's in my background, so I'm adding a little bit of gesso here and there, and also I'm using a little bit of water to make the gesso a little thinner. Now I'm adding what will eventually be the focal point of our canvas, this large peony blossom stencil. I'm smoothly pushing some molding paste through the holes of the stencil so that it becomes 3D and raised off of the canvas. After I do the first one on the left, I'll lift the stencil up and also put a small little piece of the stencil on the right to balance the canvas out and have a little bit of peony peeking out on that right side as well. I let this canvas then dry overnight to ensure that the molding paste was fully dry before I began the next layers. So now it's time for our next layer. I'm adding these black number stickers to the right and also a bunch of random numbers from some old rub-ons all over the canvas on the front and the sides. I only added 1 set of the number stickers because now I have 3 kind of focal points on the front of the canvas. I like to do things in 3s, so I have the large peony, the smaller peony, and the set of numbers, and all 3 of those create a raised texture and are kind of harmonious in that grouping of 3. And now we're adding our next layer, which is going to be some ink spray through stencils. First, I'm going to add some art guard on my hands because inevitably when I use black spray, I get it all over my hands and it takes days to come off. So this art guard will help me get the black off of my fingers, which you'll see in a minute how much black right there that I got on my fingers. And I got some dots in places I didn't want, so I wiped those away quick so they didn't stay. And then with the remaining ink that's on my stencil, I'm just hitting it on the sides of my canvas a little bit to add some grungy black. And then I picked up this number stencil and did the same thing. So now I'm adding some more gesso. However, this time it's super heavy gesso. This will not only knock back some of my layers again, but also add more texture to the front of the canvas. And this will add some more interest when we do our next glazing layers after this. The gesso will also take a little bit longer to dry, so make sure you let it dry really well before you begin the next layers. Now we're going to add 3 layers of glaze in different colors to our canvas. This process is going to look a little scary if you've never done glazing before. However, it's really simple and it leaves an amazing effect on the front of the canvas. You're going to mix part glaze and part paint together and then spread it completely all over your canvas. Patiently let it dry for about a minute or 2, and it's not going to completely dry because you want to be able to wipe it away. However, when you wipe it away, it's going to be stuck in the little cracks and crevices of our texture, which is why we used that super heavy gesso a minute ago. So now I'm going to add just a little bit more of that watered down gesso on the front of the canvas to help push back some of those black dots that I thought were sticking out just a little bit too much. And this will also help our next layer of color cling to the front a little bit more with our glaze. Now it's our next layer of glaze with the same process except using Payne's Gray. Make sure that you also glaze the sides of your canvas every time you do this. When I do the Payne's Gray, I didn't concentrate on putting it in the peony too much because I wanted to make sure that the teal was mainly in between the petals of the peony. And then you'll just wipe it away and it will stick in those cracks and crevices again on the front of your canvas. This process does use a lot of baby wipes, so you might want to have a second package on hand. And now it's our third layer, and this one is even scarier because it's so dark. We're adding the raw umber, and this will give the canvas even more grunge. And I add this over the entire canvas and let it set again for a minute or two and then wipe it away. After looking at my canvas, I decided I wanted a little bit more of that raw umber in certain places, so I used my puddle of paint and glaze in my finger and just purposely put it in areas that I thought could use a little bit more grunge, wiping it away, putting it back, and it's just kind of a back and forth until you're happy with how the front of your canvas looks. Because it's the glaze again, you can wipe it away really easily and keep adding more as you need. So I ran out of paint in my puddle here and had to make a little bit more of the glaze and raw umber mixture to continue this process. I also concentrated on the edges, the sides and the edges especially, because I wanted those to be a lot more darker than the center of my canvas. So once you're happy with how the raw umber looks on the front of your canvas, it's time to start the process of adding color to our peonies. I worked on that peony on the right a little bit off camera, and then I'm going to do this large one for you. I'm using pan pastels here, and I started in the center with the lighter color and then worked to the darker color on the edges of the peony, just back and forth as I felt that the flower needed to look. There was really no rhyme and reason to what I did. I just kept the edges dark and the center light. And then once in a while I knocked the canvas off to get some of that extra pastel dust that was on my canvas off of it so I could see what it looked like. It's just really a back and forth process. The cool thing about pastels, especially these pan pastels, is that if you're not happy with something, you can use an eraser. And I actually did use an eraser in the spots around the peony that got some of the extra red dust on it, but I forgot to record that part, so you won't see that process, but you'll magically see it disappear eventually. And I did use a baby wipe too and wipe some of it back, but then eventually did use an eraser. And now I'm grabbing a white charcoal pencil and adding some of the veining or lines that are sometimes in peony blossoms. I thought that that would add a little bit of highlight to those petals and some more dimension and life to them. And just tracing them around them, adding lines, going back and forth to both of those peony blossoms. So looking at my canvas at this point, I decided I didn't have enough teal. I liked how much teal there was in the center of those peonies and the few places sticking out, but there just wasn't enough. So I grabbed these 2 bottles of the golden fluid acrylics and even diluted them just a little bit more with water so that they would drip down the front of my canvas. I was really nervous for this process, so I grabbed a bunch of paper towels at the ready in case they dripped in the wrong places, and just went back and forth dripping water down the front of the canvas and wiping away the drips I didn't like until I got to a place where I thought the teal looked really good. And it's just like another back and forth process here with the diluted paint and the paper towels and tilting my canvas to get it to look right. I even added some of that on the edges to add some more teal to the edges of the canvas. And then I decided that it was good to put some of the the brown drips on the front too. This is the sepia color, and I'm dripping it the same way that I did the teal and intentionally wiping it off and trying to get it to look just right and how I envision these drips to look down the front of my canvas. Because it's so fluid, it's easy to wipe off and try again and not be nervous about what you're doing here, because it's another back and forth process. And I put it also on the edges to cover up that teal. And then I decided I needed some splatters, so I didn't want the splatters on those peony blossoms, covered them up and did some splattering, dried that because I was really happy with it, and then started to put some more layers on the edges. And it was time to add some more splatters. The splatters are just like the drips, and then if I added too many splatters, it was really easy to wipe them away and remove the ones that I thought were just a little bit too much. So I decided that there were some areas that I still needed a little bit more brown, so I made another puddle of that glazing medium and the brown paint and added some of that brown here and there where I thought that it needed a little bit more shadows, especially around those peonies. And here I am again with some more of the teal drips. It really was a process of just getting how I wanted this front to look, with enough drips, enough color, but not too much color, and enough brown shading. So I just went back and forth until I was happy with how the front looked. At this point, I'm trying really hard for that teal not to drip down into the peony. However, when it does, I realized that I really liked how the teal was dripping into the peony, and it really helped set it off even more from the background. So then I intentionally put some teal in between the petals and around the peony to add a little bit more brightness and color. And you can see what a difference that starts to make on the canvas and starts moving into the direction that I really wanted it to look like. A few more splatters here, and I think I'm almost done with this teal and sepia and umber layer for the front of my canvas. To darken the edges even more and add a little bit more grunge, I simply rubbed this Distress Ink Walnut Stain ink pad around the edges until I was happy with the results. Now I wanted to add some words to the front of my canvas using a stamp. I had in my head that I wanted to be brave and stamp directly onto my canvas, but at the last minute I chickened out. So I grabbed some tissue paper and stamped my Live Inspired statement onto the tissue paper, cut it out, and used a little matte medium to adhere it to the front. Using the tissue paper and matte medium is a great way to put this sentiment on the front without seeing it, and then not having to be nervous and worried that you're going to stamp it crooked or too much or miss a letter here and there, so it would have been like I've inspired instead of Live Inspired. So because I haven't sprayed the piece yet and I've been handling it quite a bit, some of that white charcoal veining from my petals has disappeared, so I'm just adding it back in here quick before moving on to the next step. Now it's time to add some fun drops of ink to the front of the canvas. This becomes similar to earlier where I went back and forth on the droplets and the splatters of the teal and the sepia, and that I splattered some black ink here and there, erased the ones I didn't like, tried to intentionally splatter some where I wanted it to be, didn't like it, erased it, tried again, and then eventually I make a little puddle of the black ink and use my paintbrush and do some smaller splatters on the front. At this point, I'm feeling the canvas might be getting a little bit too dark and it's missing some of that white highlight, so I decided to make a puddle of gesso, added a little bit of water so it wasn't so intense, and splattered that onto the front of my canvas. Again, just like I had been doing, splattering some of the paint, wiping away the ones I didn't like, splattering again until I got it to look exactly how I wanted or hoped that it would turn out. Once you're happy with how all of your layers have come together, and you've added the veining back into your petals and all your drops are perfect, it's important to take this outside and spray it with a fixative. This will set the pastel and the charcoal and also that walnut stain around the edges. When I was outside spraying my canvas, I looked down and thought that I needed to add a little square around this live-inspired sentiment so it would stand out a little bit more. So after I sprayed it and it dried, I brought it back in and used my Stabilo All in the black and in the graphite and just went back and forth again, adding lines and sketchiness around the statement. And then I picked up a really fine paintbrush and activated this Stabilo All because it is water soluble to add a little bit of shading to my lines. And this was another back and forth process, wiping it away, adding the lines, and getting it how I wanted it to look. And then since this Stabilo All is also water soluble, when I was finished, I just added a little bit more spray of fixative to that area. And then my canvas was finally finished. I really enjoyed creating this inspired peony canvas tutorial for you, and I hope that inspires you to make one too. Check out the description box below to learn how you can win this peony stencil and other supplies from me, along with many awesome prizes from the Mixed Media Mania Hop sponsors. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay to the end of the video to click on the link for the next YouTube tutorial in the Hop.